useState versus useReducer. To show the comparison between the useState and the useReducer, we are going to exemplify it by fetching data from an API endpoint. So, in this example, we are going to see how to fetch data using the effect hook with the help of the useState hooks to maintain the state transition or transformation. And in the next lecture, we are going to see how to fetch the same data with useEffect hook using the useReducer to maintain the state transition. And by so doing, you will be able to compare the useState and the useReducer in order to know when and how to use them. Within the components directory, let's quickly create a new package called useState and useReducer. Right within this package, let's create a new component called useState DataFetch. Generate the functional component. What we are going to do in this lecture is to make an API call to fetch data as soon as the component mounts. And while the data is being fetched, we will display the loading indicator. So, when the data is fetched successfully, we will hide the loading indicator and display the data. Lastly, we will cancel the loading indicator and show the error message if a problem arises while loading the data. Let's quickly define the state variables and their setter methods. And before we proceed with that, you have to import the useState from React. So we have to declare the necessary state variables to be used. And here we are going to have isLoading, comma, set isLoading. And the default state will be set to true. So when we make an API call, you are going to see the loading bar right on the browser. And over here, we are going to have the error. And then we are going to set the error over here. This should be comma case. And the initial state right here is going to be an empty string. Lastly, we are going to have the post, and this should be also in comma case. And the initial state is going to be an object. So this will be used to hold the initial state of the data, and this will be used to update the initial state of the data. So in other words, when we fetch the data, this will be used to update the initial state of the post. When the data is processing under the hood, we will display the loading indicator. And this is needed when something goes wrong. And lastly, this will be used to store and update the state with the new data that will be fetched. The next in line is to make the API call and update the necessary state. To make the API call, we definitely have to invoke the useEffect. First, we have to import it at the top. And right here, we have to invoke the effect. And the effect takes in two parameters. First is the function, which is in this case, an arrow function. And second is a dependency array. And I'm going to leave it as an empty dependency array. Having done this, the next in line is to make a GET request. And to do that, first, we have to install Axios. And of course, we installed Axios earlier on in the previous lecture. But if you do not have it installed, you just have to come to the terminal and then Ctrl+C to stop the currently running server. And then we are going to do Node Package Manager, install Axios. I have it installed already, so there is no need to do this the second time. But if you do not have it in your machine, you just have to hit the Enter key to have it installed. Let me wipe it off. Scroll to the top and then haven't installed Axios. We have to import it at the top. Import Axios from Axios. The function within the useEffect hook is called the effect. And here exactly is where the side effect takes place. So right within the effect, we are going to make a get request. And so we are going to do axios.get. It's as simple as that. We are going to use the JSON placeholder endpoint. So quickly head on to the JSON placeholder and copy the URL of a post. And we want to target the route that will return a specific post. I'm just going to copy, come here, right within the string, I'm just going to paste. Whenever we make a get request, it always returns a promise. Therefore, we are going to have a then block. Then. So when the request is successful, we have to make some state transition. We're going to have here a response. So when the request is successful, we have to set the isLoading to false. And also, we have to update the initial state with the new data that we fetched. So I'm going to do set post response.data. And lastly, we have to set the error to an empty string simply because the fetch is successful. Set error to an empty string. This happens when the fetch is successful, but not every time you will have a smooth ride. Yeah, so sometimes you may have some problem, the data fetching will not be successful. So if something goes wrong, we have to trap the error and handle it in the catch block. Let's quickly specify the catch block quickly. Right after this guy, which is the then, the promise that it returns, we are going to have the catch. And what are we going to catch? We are going to catch any existing error that is found. We also have to set isLoading to false. We have to set post to an empty object, which is the initial state of the post. Okay, let me show you at the top. And here is it. Right? Perfect. And then we have to set error to something like this. So we are going to do, oops, something went wrong. Having done this in the effect, the next in line is to display the data in the JSS. If the component is busy loading the data, we are going to display the loading indicator. And else, when the data is successfully fetched, we have to display the data. Right within the curly bracket, because over here we have to take in some JavaScript expression. And I'm going to do if it's loading is equal true. Alright, so if the application is loading, we are going to say data is loading. And else, if the data is fetched, we have to get the post dot title. Let's check out the post. Okay, we can get the title or the body. Let's get the post body. And also, we want to display the error on the screen. So if there's an error, we have to display the error, which is this right up over here. And else, if there's no error, we have to set it to null. When you save the application, make sure to render it in the app component. Come here. And we did all of this in the previous lecture. So I just placed a comment on them. Import useState DataFetch from component / useState and useReducer / useState DataFetch. I talk too much. Alright, so let's have it rendered right within the app component. useState DataFetch. We also have to run the application over here. And I'm going to do npm start. Wait for it. it shows the loading indicator, and when the process was successful, it then showed the data. So when you reload the application, you definitely will see the loading indicator. Can you see? Though it appears within the twinkle of an eye, but if your internet is quite slow, you are going to see it within some few seconds. Take a look. Can you see? Everything is working perfectly fine as expected. So let me show you something, because we also want to make sure that the error indicator is also working perfectly fine. So head back to VS Code, and right here, I'm just going to alter the URL. So this URL is incorrect. Therefore, the error is going to be displayed on the screen. When you save, on the browser, reload, oops, something went wrong. The purpose of this example is to check out the state transition when using the useState as a state variable to fetch data. So let's see how it looks like when we implement this same example with the useReducer hook. This is all for now. In the next lecture, we are going to see how to implement this example with the useReducer. See you in the next lecture.